Hey everyone, God bless you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I have a small reflection to offer you today. I hope it will encourage you and strengthen you in the virtue of humility. This reflection I'm entitling, Do You Have a Right to Communion? I'm using this occasion to help you think about the way that you approach in the liturgy to receive Holy Communion. I'll tell you, when I was a brand new priest, I was visiting another parish, and I was concelebrating with the pastor of that parish. And it happened to be also a day on which the local bishop was there. And we were celebrating the liturgy, and the priest had told me about a pastoral problem that he had with one of his parishioners, in which, unfortunately, a man was really out of his mind and behaving in an unfortunate way. And the priest had warned him not to come to Holy Communion, that he would not be served because he wasn't in the proper disposition to receive properly. The man was not happy about this and was not willing to accept his pastor's guidance in this. And he thought to himself, this man who was a little bit out of his mind, thought to himself, well, the bishop's coming on Sunday. I'll circumvent my priest's guidance, pastoral guidance, by simply getting in the communion line for the bishop, and I'll receive Holy Communion from the bishop. So there we were, all three of us were out serving different chalices, and the host pastor spied the man out at the back of the communion line, and saw what he was trying to do, that he was trying to get into the line that was coming to the bishop so that he could circumvent his pastor's guidance and pastoral discipline. So the pastor whispered over to the bishop, the man I spoke with you about earlier is in your line trying to come for communion. Immediately, the bishop took the communion cloth, covered the top of the chalice, and walked right into the altar, forcing the man to get into the line of the pastor and not to be able to pull his trick. I've never forgotten that story 30 plus years ago. It's always stayed in my mind as a witness of the sensitive nature of pastoring, especially when it comes to the chalice, and also sometimes the wrong-headedness that we Christians can have when it comes to judging ourselves worthy or unworthy of receiving Holy Communion. There have been several moments in Christian history in which just this question of pastoral guidance with regards to Holy Communion have become massive issues. One of those circumstances, one of those historical moments, took place in the 3rd century, and it involved the great patriarch of Antioch, whose name was Babylas, Saint Babylas, an incredible saint of the 3rd century and a martyr. And if you're familiar with the life of St. John Chrysostom, who lived in the same town 100 years later, you'll know that St. John dearly loved St. Babylas, and cherished his memory and his witness for the Church of Antioch, and wrote about Babylas. In fact, one of the apologetic treatises that St. John Chrysostom wrote, defending Christianity, is called On Blessed Babylas and Against the Pagan Greeks. And in this treatise, he describes the conflict that St. Babylas had in the 3rd century over the distribution of Holy Communion, and especially with an emperor in the middle of the 3rd century. This emperor is not named in the treatise, but most scholars suggest that the emperor was Philip the Arab. This is in the middle of the 3rd century. Philip is considered by most historians to be a Christian, perhaps the first Christian emperor of the Roman Empire. In the story, in the historical account, what happens is that Philip the emperor comes for Holy Communion and is excluded by St. Babylas, the Bishop of Antioch, from being able to receive the holy gifts because Philip had committed a murder that Bishop Babylas considered to be grossly immoral and not justifiable, despite the fact that the emperor was trying to justify it. And so he put Babylas out of communion and would not accept him to come to the chalice, which of course is a very bold move for a bishop to do, a right move, a correct move in this circumstance, but a very bold move, especially in the face of the all-powerful Roman emperor, who himself apparently was Christian. I think maybe he had become Christian on his mother's side. That's the influence there. Babilis sadly punished, or rather, Philip the Arab sadly punished, the emperor punished St. Babilis and had him murdered. And then Babilis himself would eventually be overthrown by Decius, who assumed power over the Roman Empire and launched a terrible persecution against Christians that didn't end until around 258, the Decian persecution. Move 100 years later, St. John Chrysostom is the cathedral preacher in Antioch, which he did for 12 years. And St. Babilis features large in Antiochian life because he was buried, his martyric bones were buried in a suburb on the corner of the city of Antioch called Daphne. It was the place of a very famous shrine of Apollo where there was an active oracle. But when they buried Babilis there, all the oracles ended. The great bones of the saint shut down that demonic work. And so for 100 years, Babilis had been there, and he featured large in the piety of Christians in that area. Remember, this is the most important city in the east. I, in fact, visited Daphne, this suburb of Antioch, which is now in southern Turkey, in 2010. And it's still demarcated. It's still set apart as this historical place. Well, at the time of St. John Chrysostom, remember, we have the horrible apostate emperor Julian, who had grown up with St. Basil and St. Gregory the Theologian, and was a Christian, was even a tonsure reader, then apostatized and went back to Greek paganism. And he wanted to remove St. Babilis's bones so that the oracle at Daphne would begin to speak. And he was very much into oracles and sacrifices to the gods. But while he was trying to do this, lightning struck and sent the emperor into terror, and Babilis was left untouched. St. John Chrysostom considered this a great intervention of God. St. John Chrysostom praises St. Babilis's faithfulness in this treatise on the blessed Babilis and against the pagan Greeks. He praises Babilis's faithfulness and his courage, and he warns bishops and priests never to impart the sacred gifts, never to impart Holy Communion to those who are unworthy, to those who are scandalous. These are his words. He says, Babilis showed that one appointed to the priesthood is a more responsible guardian of the earth and what transpires upon it than one who wears the purple, than the emperor himself, and that the magnitude of priestly power is not to be diminished, but one's life is to be surrendered sooner than the authority which God has assigned to this office from above is surrendered. For he who dies in this way could benefit everyone after death. This is, of course, exactly what he's saying St. Babilis did, who is the model of defending the authority of Christ and the laws of the church, even in the face of the most powerful politician. Politicians must obey the church, not vice versa. For he who dies in this way could benefit everyone even after death, whereas he who abandons his post not only benefits no one after death, but even while alive weakens most of those under his command. Here he's describing what would have happened if Babilis had become a compromised bishop or a compromised priest who shakes at the presence of some politician, some senator, or some president. Aren't we familiar with these scenes? These scenes have dotted American life in recent decades, where a politician who is most definitely, according to the standards of his own church, unworthy of receiving, and yet does. For he who dies in this way could benefit everyone even after death, whereas he who abandons his post not only benefits no one after death, but even while alive weakens most of those under his command, and becomes an object of scorn and ridicule to the pagans. And when he departs this world, here he's describing the priest who unfaithfully serves communion to those that he should not. He will stand at the judgment seat of Christ with much shame and dejection, and from there the powers assigned this task will drag him and carry him off to the furnace. Lord have mercy, I'm hiding. St. John Chrysostom on the importance of guarding the chalice. Chrysostom elsewhere describes that the proper guarding of the chalice, the proper vetting of those who are prepared properly to receive Holy Communion is the is under the purview of the deacons. If you want to read more about this, you can read in the 82nd of his sermons on the Gospel of Matthew, where Chrysostom addresses the deacons directly and says that it's necessary for them to hinder from communion anyone who approaches unworthily, even the emperor, since the authority of the church is greater than the imperial authority. And then St. John Chrysostom says this marvelous word. But if thou darest not to do it thyself, if it's too much for you as a deacon to stop them, bring him to me. I will not allow any to dare do these things. I would give up my life rather than impart of the Lord's blood to the unworthy, and will shed my own blood rather than impart of such awful blood contrary to what is meet. There you have it, from the Golden Mouth himself, one of the three great holy hierarchs of the church. You know, this 3rd century scene that led to St. Babylus's martyrdom, as glorious as it is also a witness to the rise of the church in the 3rd century. The church is growing like crazy. Here we have an emperor, Philip the Arab, who is quite probably the first of the emperors to profess Christianity, although there's a lot of obscurity around his life. And yet in the standoff between the emperor and Babylus ends up a martyr. Fast forward 100 years. Emperor Theodosius is now on the throne. He has overreacted to some rebellion in Thessalonica and orders a massacre in which 7,000 people are killed by his soldiers in what's gone down to history is called the Thessalonican Massacre. St. Ambrose, his friend and spiritual father, hears of this and bans him from Holy Communion. Theodosius comes and is not allowed in the church and is made to do penance. And he does. 100 years later, the emperor, in a similar circumstance, doesn't martyr the bishop. He accepts the supreme authority of the church over the civil realm and with regards to the sacraments, and humbles himself, follows his spiritual father's direction, repents, and is reconciled to the church and reinstated in communion, and in fact becomes a saint. Theodosius the Great, we call him Saint Theodosius the Great, this pious emperor. Dear ones, I present these examples to you for encouragement, to answer this simple question. Should we ever imagine that we have a right to Holy Communion? Should we even use that language? It's most inappropriate. We have no right to Holy Communion. We of all people are most unworthy of receiving. Holy Communion is a mighty grace, an incredible offer of love from the Lord who loves men and is willing to be so humble as to be united to us into one flesh, giving to us out of his great desire to be with us and in us, giving us his own deified flesh so that we might eat his flesh and drink his blood and be one with him, having him literally coursing through all of our body, permeating our souls and bodies from top to bottom. When we come to Holy Communion, we're holding our very souls in our hands. We come by the blessing of our bishop, according to the church's guidance concerning reconciliation and confession and fasting and participation in the service. We hear the deacon say, with the fear of God, faith and love draw near. That's how we approach. With the fear of the Lord, with faith, with love. We become worthy by esteeming ourselves unworthy. And after we receive the gifts, we swim in an ocean of thanksgiving prayers. Don't miss those. Don't launch into your fellowship and conversation with your brothers and sisters right after receiving Holy Communion. You'll have that in a few minutes when you go to your hall and have an agape meal together. Instead, listen to the prayers of thanksgiving that follow. Listen to those beautiful prayers. We become worthy by esteeming ourselves unworthy. We then, after receiving, swim in an ocean of thanksgiving prayers, knowing ourselves to have received the greatest honor possible to a human being. That is the true and tangible union with the God-man, Jesus Christ. We have no right to communion. It's a great gift. God be with you. blessed Lord's Day to all of you, brothers and sisters.
For November 17th, on which we commemorate Saint Gregory of Tours.
As we begin this new course in the St. John Chrysostom Catechetical School.
Now available on both Apple and Google Play stores.